Welcome to Fluid Ride Like a Pro. I'm Simon Lawton.
And I'm Lars Sternberg.
We're here in beautiful Port Angeles today, riding some great trails. The things we're going to be talking about today are going to benefit all riders of all disciplines. Let's go have some fun. The first skill, and most important, probably the base layer I would say of the pyramid, is braking. I mean, without being able to control your bicycle properly, without being able to come to a stop safely, you're really not going to feel comfortable on the bicycle. And once you feel like you have control over the bicycle, you're going to be a lot more comfortable, you're going to be able to relax, and you're going to be able to perform better. When brake modulation is occurring, your tires are turning at the speed or maybe just slightly below the speed that the ground is moving past your bicycle. And what I mean by that is it's almost as if you're about to start to skid. Your bicycle is trying to stop as quickly as it can, and you're just on that edge of your tires actually moving a little slower than the ground is going. So you're really pushing to get as much out of your brakes as you possibly can without creating skidding. And in general, for less experienced riders, the thing I teach them is that you're never going to ride on with just your front brake in any situation. There are very few rare situations where you'll be just on your back brake, but always when we're braking, and this is something that most people don't think about because your brain kind of does it for you, you're always going to get on the front brake or the back brake a little bit first, move into the front brake, release the front brake, and then be off the back brake. So your front brake is never on by itself. It's a really important thing because it'll drag the front end of your bike down or pull you through a turn or something.
I would definitely say the modulation is the last instant before, using the full power of your brakes, but keeping it to the last instant before you're actually skidding.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that's kind of maybe even gone a little bit too far in with the technology. I mean, we have brakes that are so powerful now that I see a lot of riders who maybe, they could probably get a lot more out of a brake that has a little bit less power, even because they can get their hands into it. They don't have to be so sensitive to it. And a lot of people just automatically gravitate toward the most powerful brake, the biggest, baddest, newest brake on the market. And I think that unless you have really sensitive use of your hands and a lot of experience, a lot of times that can actually lead you down the wrong road a little bit. So kind of thinking about how you brake, how well you use your hands. If you have a tendency to skid a lot, maybe it's time for a set of brakes that's not just overkill.
Yeah, one of the best ways to learn how to modulate is go run your fingers along your brake rotor and get them all greasy, and then you can. No, just kidding. When you're in the molache, so to speak, you can be a bit more aggressive with your brakes, because your tires are gonna get better traction. You're gonna be able to come in a bit hotter to certain obstacles. And brake later, and brake harder.
Yeah.
Whereas, say, when you're in sandy or dry and dusty conditions, or when you're in kind of a loose, gravelly sort of condition, or especially in the wet, you're gonna need to do a bit more modulating, than you would somewhere else, and that's just being lighter on the brakes, especially if it's wet and there's some roots or something before a turn. You're going to want to get your braking done before you get onto that section of roots, because you're going to want as much traction as you can get.
Yeah, and that's something we refer to at Fluid Ride. We refer to that as selective braking. Basically, selective braking involves is usually done on days where the conditions aren't perfect. And sometimes you might brake in a place before you normally brake and then just have to let off the brakes to get over something slippery, maybe a slab of rock or some roots or things like that. So in those situations where it's really slippery, you're actually looking for zones that I call safety zones, places where you can actually slow your bicycle down a little bit before the next section.
This also works hand in hand with selective braking in good conditions. If you can stay a lot more in control if you have a section of trail with different undulations and turns and obstacles. If you brake in a couple key areas, whereas as opposed to just dragging the brakes, all the way down, or say getting into a situation where you get out of control and you just lock up the rear brake or the front brake or whatever, and that's going to either lead to a complete loss of control and crashing or one thing or another. So
after we teach proper modulation and show people how to stop, we start taking a look at their body and what's going on with it. Basically, when you put on the brakes on a bicycle, even on flat ground, it's going to pull your body forward into the bicycle. And that's going to really show me a lot about how the person deals with that force.
Be aware of what those forces are going to want to do to you or cause your body to do.
Well, like Lars is saying, you want to be ready to feel that pressure of the bicycle pushing you into it effectively, and you want to be ready to kind of fend that off and just be ready to firm up a little bit. But you want to stay away from completely premeditating it to where you think, oh man, last time I had this bad experience, I'm going to push my bike away before I grab my brakes. And that's something that I see in beginner riders or even intermediate riders a lot, and it really leads to a loss of control, kind of pushing their bicycle out before they grab the brakes, knowing that's going to push them toward them. So we want to premeditate more kind of mentally and just know that, but we want to know what it's going to feel like when we grab our brakes and be able to adjust our human suspension into that feeling of progressive braking, but not push the bicycle away in anticipation. So one of the important factors with body position is that we want to keep our elbows out. If we tuck our elbows in too much and grab the brakes, we're going to get pushed forward through the shoulders and through the front of the bike, which is a really dangerous position to be in. We've all felt that before, that pressure of the heel pushing us forward into our bicycle. What we actually want to do is we want to put our hands on the handlebars in such a way that the bar is going to run at a diagonal angle through our hand like this, and it's going to bring our elbows out by bringing that palm out toward the edge of the handlebar. Another important thing is going to be the way Lars holds his knees. If he's too stiff-legged or if he brings his knees in too close to the frame and gets what I call knock-kneed, then he's not going to be able to bend properly at the knees or at the hips, and that's going to cause his lower back to bend, cause him to stoop, and cause his head to come down when he's braking, which is going to basically create an imbalance in his inner ear, as well as making it less easy to see the trail ahead of him. So knees bent, knees out just slightly, elbows out, and chin up, good riding position like that. It's going to put Lars in a great position coming down a hill to fend off the forces of gravity. Another thing that's important is our foot position on the pedals. We want to make sure that our feet are either flat, or if we're descending down steep terrain, that our heels are tipped back slightly. As soon as I get tipped forward over the pedal spindle too much, everything else is going to fall apart. Basically, I'm going to put too much pressure into my body, I'm going to end up bending at the back, and I'm going to end up kind of hunched over and feel like I'm pushing through the handlebars too much. Basically, yeah, elbows out, knees out a little bit, being in that position so that my body can push down through the suspension into the tires and create control. And only by being in that position is my head going to be able to be up and be balanced. The other thing you're going to hear me talk about today is riding inside the bicycle and riding inside our body. And this is one of the places where we're really going to take a look at that. Now what I mean by that is as I'm braking,